We ready? The next domain that we're going to talk about is the social emotional domain. And during late childhood, children start to develop a greater sense of themselves. And this is evident in their self-descriptions. In the 6 students that we interviewed, we asked them each to give 5 characteristics of themselves. And the most common answers we got were funny, hardworking, smart, all more psychological characteristics. Out of those 30 descriptors, only one person described themselves in a more concrete fashion using the word pretty. During this time, self-esteem and self-concept also start to get developed. The book describes self-esteem as a more global evaluation, while self-concept is a more specific evaluation of oneself. It's important to remember that at this stage in development, that how they view themselves and how they truly are don't always match. It's not always realistic. It's also important to remember as counselors how much self-esteem building is too much during this phase in development. Studies have shown that children who have too much self-esteem sometimes have problems in competition situations or accepting criticism because they don't ever see themselves as being wrong. During this time, a sense of self-efficacy is also developed. Albert Bandura talked about self-efficacy being the I can versus the I cannot. And students who see themselves as able to do something will see challenges more as opportunities and be willing to take that risk to do it. During this time in late childhood, self-regulation also starts to develop. And you see the children who have a greater sense of self-regulation as far as their emotions and their behaviors are those that came from warm and fostering parents. So when the parents let them know it's okay to make a mistake and try again, those children are more likely to try again. Erik Erikson described the fourth stage of development in industry versus inferiority as happening during the late childhood. Industry is described as wanting to know how things are made or how things are built. And in our interviews, a lot of the common answers as far as what are things that you do with friends, Legos, playing, Minecraft, all things where they're constructing and they're evaluating. Erikson believed that when children are encouraged in these efforts, that it strengthens their sense of industry, whereas if these efforts are seen as mischievous, it strengthens their sense of inferiority. Also during late childhood, children will start to develop their emotional strengths. Some of the things that you will see are emotional understanding. They will be able to sense when something is coming and maybe be able to prepare themselves for it a little better. They also notice that other people are also involved in situations and it's not always so self-centered. During middle and late childhood, children also start to develop a capacity for empathy. And as a teacher, I see that and I think that's so important, which is why I pulled this quote out. When educating the minds of our youth, we must not forget to educate their hearts. So it's important that we remember to teach children and set the example as to how to be kind and empathetic of others. During late childhood, children also develop coping mechanisms with stress. They're able to sense these situations coming and then able to do something about them. Some of the more common strategies that the book mentioned were shifting their thoughts to something else, reframing a set of circumstances, changing the perception. When we interviewed our students, we asked, what do you do when you have a conflict with friends? And the 2 most common answers were compromise and apologize. They also talked about visiting with their parents, asking a teacher for help. And one young lady said that when she would fight with her friends, she would make them cupcakes. I think I want her to be my friend. Also, we need to talk about trauma and disaster, because although in general, children in late childhood start to develop these skills, Sometimes it's just too much. And when there are traumatic events such as 9/11 or Sandy Hook, they can't apply those normal coping skills. And it's at that point where their caretakers, their parents, their teachers need to step in and let them know that it is going to be okay and help guide them through that healing process. I found an interesting study that talked about environmental factors leading to adolescent stress, which leads to anxiety disorders as adults. And we can all imagine that events like 9/11 and Sandy Hook would have a huge traumatic event or effect. But we also need to remember as counselors that some of these other factors also play a role in that. So the economic status, the educational level of parents, conflict in the household, all of these environments in childhood can lead to stress in adolescence, which isn't adequately dealt with, which will then lead to anxiety disorders such as depression or mood disorders in adults. During this stage in development, children also start to become more flexible in their gender attitudes. Although there still are stereotypes and there are some characteristics that have been proven true, like women have, I think, women have 2% more body fat than men. Men are 10% taller. Women tend to score better in verbal skills, where men score better in visual spatial skills. Some of those things are going to hold true through study, but their general attitudes start to change during this time. One of the things that I thought was very interesting was that boys at this age are more physically aggressive, where girls at this age are more relationally aggressive. And relationally aggressive means that they will manipulate people and situations to get what they want. And there's also been proven a link between parents' relational aggression and children's relational aggression. And as a teacher, I can definitely see that and attest to that. And I can also attest to those specific facts. I also thought that it was interesting that girls are more emotional at this age and they're able to sense emotion in others, where boys are not. They just have a lessened sense of regulation, and then that therefore kind of leads to some trouble sometimes because they don't sense when trouble is coming. I found a little video talking about stereotypes and how life would be if we still held on to those childhood stereotypes as adults. So we're going to pause me, watch the video, and then I'll be back.